Hey, I'm Abby, and welcome back to the Life Work Balance YouTube channel. Today, I would like to share with you 8 different scenarios that you can prepare to answer behavior-based interview questions. But before we jump into that, please go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you're excited to hear these 8 different scenarios to prepare. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well as the bell so that you can receive life work balance advice delivered directly to you every Sunday. So behavior-based interview questions are very common during the interview process. These are questions that usually start with a sentence like, tell me about a time when you ... or give me an example when ... And so you have to explain a behavior that you engaged in order to fully answer the question. I've got a video that gives you a formula on the best way for you to answer any type of behavior-based question. You can go ahead and find it in the description box below. And this formula, there's actually 2 formulas. The first formula is CAR and the second formula is STAR. They are both very similar and they give you a structured way to answer any behavior-based interview question. So CAR is my preference just because it's shorter and a little bit easier to remember. STAR is another very popular formula. CAR stands for context, action, and result. So you give the context to a scenario that you're about to explain, you describe the action that you took, and then you describe the result that was achieved based on the actions that you took in that context. STAR, on the other hand, is S, which is situation. So you describe the situation or the context. T is the task that you engaged in. A is the action that you took. And R is the result that you achieved. So STAR and CAR are both very similar, except context kind of combines the S and the T, situation and task, from STAR. So I prefer CAR just because it's shorter and a little easier to remember. STAR is just as effective as CAR. So when you answer any behavior-based interview question, you want to use one of those formulas to frame your response. This will help you keep your answer short and concise and will ensure that you're providing the interviewer just enough information so that they can understand why you're providing this answer to their question. It also allows you to pace yourself and to go through a systematic process to answering a question so that you don't ramble. What's great about the STAR and the CAR method is that you can come up with predetermined scenarios that you can use to answer these types of behavior-based questions so that you don't have to think on your feet and wing it as often. So when it comes to behavior-based questions, there are a few different types of questions that you can prepare for your interview. In fact, there's 8 different types of primary behavior-based interview questions, so you can prepare 8 answers rather than try to think of 20 different scenarios. When you prepare these 8 answers, you can then tailor your response to certain questions, but still use the same type of scenario so that you can answer almost any type of question relatively easy. So think of it as you've got a toolbox, you've got 8 different tools to fit in that toolbox, and while you may need to use a different tool for a different type of job, you can likely use the same tool for various different types of jobs that are similar. So let's go over those 8 different types of questions or scenarios that you can prepare answers for ahead of time so that you don't feel like you have to wing it or stumble through responses during the interview process. So first, you want to make sure that you have a scenario prepared that describes how you handle conflict or disagreement. So you could think back to any situation where you may have had conflict with another person or a group of people, and you would want to think of a situation or context, describe the action that you took in that situation or the context, and then the result that was achieved based on the actions that you took. So think of a situation where you may have been engaged in some sort of conflict, and what did you do and what was the result of those actions? This could be a conflict at home with friends or family. It could be a conflict that you have at school as a part of a group project that you're working on at school. Or it could be an actual experience that you have in your professional life where it's a part of a job. So some common questions that might be around conflict or disagreement are questions like, tell me about a time when you disagreed with a coworker. Tell me about a time where you disagreed with a decision made by a supervisor. Tell me about a time when you were working on a project and you disagreed with your coworkers. So while these 3 different types of questions are all very focused on work, because this is the job interview, you can use any scenario in any situation of your life, whether it's your professional life, your personal life, your educational life, whatever that might look like, and you can apply it to how you answer this question. Because the behaviors that you engage in every facet of your life are likely transferable to other parts of your life. So even if you use an answer from your personal life, you can likely show how your behaviors in your personal life will translate to your behaviors in your professional life. The second type of question or scenario that you can prepare an answer to is a question regarding collaboration and or teamwork. So how do you show up on a team? In almost every aspect of your life, you will have to work on a team in some way, shape, or form. Again, this may be a group project at school. This might be a project that you have to work on at work. This might be something that you do with your partner, your spouse, or your children at home when you're building something. So for example, you might have a question that says, tell me about a time when you had to work with someone who has a different style than you do. So this shows that you have to have the ability to adapt to different styles and that you can work together even when there are differences. Maybe they ask you a question like, tell me about a time when you worked on a team and someone wasn't pulling their weight. Tell me about a time when you had to motivate others on your team to get something accomplished by a deadline. So you can start to think of experiences that you've had where you've worked on a team or with other people and you've had to accomplish something as a team and you had to do something to achieve that goal. This is very vague, so really think of any time where you may have had to work on a team and if there were any disagreements, what things worked well, what things didn't work well, and use those as examples when you answer these questions. The third type of question you might hear that's a behavior-based interview question is something that's about customer service, dealing with a difficult customer, or anything that's more client-facing. So maybe you're asked a question like, give me an example of a time when you did not meet a client's expectations. What did you do? Or tell me about a time when a customer was very pleased with the service that you provided to them. Or tell me about a time when you interacted with a difficult customer. What did you do and how did you handle it? Customer service is a part of almost every job, so being able to describe how you've interacted with customers both positively as well as negatively will help your future employer understand how you're going to interact with customers that they might be serving. Next, you want to prepare a response to a question that asks you to describe a time when you faced an obstacle, a barrier, or a challenge. So these might be questions like, tell me about a time when you encountered a challenge at work and how did you face it? Tell me about a time when you encountered an obstacle in a project that you worked on and how did you handle it? Tell me about a time when you had to make a difficult decision that others may not have agreed with. The next type of question that you can prepare for when it comes to behavior-based interview questions is a question about communication or miscommunication. Communication is an important part of almost every job. So you want to make sure that you provide a good example that shows how you communicate and what you do if there's a miscommunication. So some questions that you might be asked would be, tell me about a time when there was a miscommunication at work and what did you do to ensure that the miscommunication was resolved? Tell me about a time when you may have had to communicate to someone who didn't see things the same way you did. Tell me about a time when you may have had to explain something to someone who didn't quite understand. The next type of scenario that you can prepare for when it comes to a behavior-based interview question is a question that asks you about an accomplishment, something that you're proud of, or something that motivates you. So this might be a question like, tell me about your proudest moment at work, or what are you most proud of when it comes to your job? Or maybe even, tell me about a time that you were dissatisfied with a product that you produced. What did you do and how did you handle it? Time management is also something that's important when it comes to jobs. So you will likely be asked a question that asks you about how you've managed your time or you've prioritized things in the past. So an example of a question like this might be, tell me about a time when you set a goal for yourself. How did you ensure you met that goal? Or tell me about a time when you managed numerous responsibilities. How did you prioritize them and handle them? So really the goal with these types of questions is to explain how you may have juggled multiple responsibilities and how you met various priorities. And finally, another type of question that you can prepare for when it comes to behavior-based interview questions is questions that look at your ability to adapt or manage change. So questions like this might be, tell me about a time when you were under a lot of pressure. What was going on and how did you get through it? Maybe it's a question like, tell me about your first job. What did you do to learn how to do that job? Or maybe even, tell me about a time you failed. How did you deal with that failure? And what did you learn? Or maybe it's tell us about a time when there was a lot of change going on in your organization. What did you do or how did you respond? So when it comes to answering these different types of questions, you can think of really 8 different scenarios that you can just tweak slightly to respond to the various questions that you might be asked in an interview. That way you don't have to come up with a different scenario to respond to every single question they ask you. You can also relate it back to scenarios that you used in the past. So for example, you might say, well, with the previous situation I was discussing where I described the project and the customer difficulties that we encountered, here's another example of how I maybe communicated in this way. That way, people can see how you may have used different behaviors and skills and techniques in various different ways to solve various different problems. And they can start to see how well-rounded you might be when it comes to working in their job. So hopefully going through these 8 different types of questions that you might encounter that are behavior-based for your next interview are helpful. So if you found this helpful and you're excited to use some of these techniques to answer questions in the future during your next interview, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, or ideas, please put them in the comments box below and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. And please remember to hit that subscribe button as well as the bell so that you can receive life-work balance advice delivered directly to you every Sunday. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.